Alright, today we're going to take a look at how to change a couple items on a VRO oil injection system. I recently changed my VRO fuel pump, and when I went to go prime the oil up, I gave the oil primer a couple of pumps, and you see here the nipple broke off on one side, so I had to order a new primer bulb for the oil. We're also going to change the filter inside of the oil tank. It's a little strainer, it's at the bottom. It's recommended that's changed periodically, and I've never done it, so we're going to get that done today. And then we're also going to replace some of the oil hose to the motor. I'm going to give you a look at the oil container to see where we're going to have to access that filter. Alright, in this boat, the oil tank is located right here. You can just see the top of it, really. And that square there with the 4 torque screws is the oil pickup. There's a hose that comes off the end where the primer bulb attaches, and the pickup, presumably underneath that, has that little plastic filter that we're going to change. So first thing we're going to do is remove those 4 torque screws. I did kind of move some of the oil and debris, wiped it away to kind of limit what falls into the oil tank while I remove this top component. Alright, with the 4 screws removed, the oil pickup and sender assembly just easily lifted out of the tank. Tank's full of oil. You need to try to be careful not to drop any debris back in there. And here we see the strainer on the bottom. Doesn't look too bad. I'm going to go ahead and remove that and then replace it the same way that it's in there. There was also an O-ring around the entire assembly. We're going to clean off the bottom of the housing, reinstall that O-ring when we reassemble everything. I do want to get that hose off and replace that hose with some new tubing. Here's the new filter next to the old. Even though the old one is old colored, that's what you would expect. Doesn't look like there's much debris in the screen. Probably going to rinse the old one off with gasoline and save it as a backup, since it's more of a screen than a filter. Alright, here it is with the new screen attached. I tried to twist it thinking that perhaps it's screwed on, but it does simply slide off, and the new one slides on with kind of a metal compression clip retainers. I still would suggest being pretty careful with it because you don't want to break anything, especially on the pickup, but ultimately it slides off, and with a little bit of force you can slide the new one back on. Alright, I'm going to move on to replacing that little piece of hose, and then I'm going to carefully clean the area and reinsert the sender into the tank. Turns out removing that little piece of hose is not as easy as what I thought. I had to take off the secondary cap, and then I clipped the compression clamp that was on there from the factory, so they don't want you switching this hose out, or I tend to think that what they want is for you to tug on it until you break this nipple so that you can take it in to a service center to have them fix it. But I'm going to go ahead and cut it off now, the hose, and replace it with some new hose, and then we'll have to see what we're going to do about that clamp. There was a plastic clamp on it here on the outside that you could see, and it actually is not even over the nipple, so totally misleading the way that was put together. Alright, we have our new hose attached. I went ahead and used a clamp, looked all around for a stainless steel one. This one looks like it's partially stainless. I'm not sure about the screw mechanism, but it's a fairly oily area, so hopefully we won't have too many corrosion problems. I might even coat it with a little oil before I close it up. I'm going to put the cap back on, and then we'll put it, slide it down into the oil tank back where it goes. Alright, here's the entire assembly reattached. Now you can purchase this entire assembly as it looks right now for around $100 on eBay, maybe a little more. And I had thought about that, but I didn't want to run the wiring up to the front dash for the warning signals. And since there was nothing wrong with this one other than needing some new hoses and a primer bulb, I decided just to change the screen. I also wiped out and cleaned the mounting area on the tank, and now I'm going to insert that assembly back into there, filter first. You need to pay special attention to the orientation of the filter when you removed it, because you want it to be pointing in the same direction when you put it back in. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Then put in the 4 screws, attach the primer ball, prime the oil to the engine, and we should be good to go. Alright, so now we have the entire assembly reinstalled. New filter strainer, new hose attached. I just want to make a final note before I install the primer ball and reroute this oil line, that anytime you're dealing with screws that screw into plastic, you need to be especially careful. These are attachment fasteners. They're not meant to be torqued down or tightened with all your might. The fact that the piece of equipment is made out of plastic shows that it's not under a lot of strain, so you want to just snug it up. Now, there was a rubber O-ring in there, so that should ease your mind that it's sealed, so no reason to crank down on screws. All you're going to do is risk damaging the plastic by stripping it and then requiring you to repurchase the entire assembly. Alright, I'm going to move to the top and plumb the primer ball and then probably zip tie some of these connections back so that everything is fairly neat and tucked away, and then we'll be done. Alright, here's our view from the top. Here we can see our oil line that goes to the engine. I previously changed that portion. Then there's a primer ball, and then our new hose is here. I want to leave kind of an excess of hose, so probably cut it around here, leaving a little bit to hang down so there's no tension, and the primer ball will be in this area where my hand is. Now, the oil primer ball is only really used when you're doing some kind of maintenance or work on the engine. You don't use that regularly, but it needs to all be in good working order. Alright, so here's the final install. I used 2 zip ties to kind of straighten up the wires. I didn't tighten the zip ties too much since I don't want to kink the hoses. I want to make sure that the oil flows freely. These primer bulbs also flow in one direction, so it's important that you orientate them in the right direction. There's an arrow usually on them. You can kind of see the arrow right here. So it's pointing towards the direction of the flow to the motor. That's important, otherwise it won't work and you could cause some catastrophic damage there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure I prime the oil all the way to the fuel pump. I'm going to disconnect the oil line there, take a little cup and prime it until I get a good flow, steady flow of oil. I'll reattach that to the fuel pump, and then I may start the engine. I'm still probably going to get some no oil alarm for a couple seconds before it pumps past the sensor in the fuel pump, but other than that, everything should be ready to go. Alright, so I disconnected the, looks like we're getting a little foggy video here. Disconnected the oil line from here. Got me a little container to collect the oil. I'm going to go ahead and prime it through when I got a good flow. Then I'll reattach it to the fuel pump. Alright, we just got the first bit through. There was quite a bit of air. I didn't think it was going to prime, but I'm squeezing it now. If you can make that out, the oil coming through. It's much harder to squeeze this than the gasoline ball. Alright, I'm going to continue that until I think maybe about half of that bottle should be adequate to make sure that that hose is all clear of air. Alright, I gave the bulb a final pump, then took the hose out of the Coke bottle and reattached it to the fuel pump nipple right there. Secured the clamp, and I think we're about ready to go. Alright, we're going to give it a crank and see what happens. I primed up the fuel, and you saw me prime up the oil. Well, depending on which video you're watching. Let's give it a shot. Did a pretty good job priming that oil. We also see some smoke coming out the exhaust. That's a good sign that it is burning oil as it should. It did, after all, a 2-stroke. Alright, looks like we got a winner. Only thing left to do now is to clean off this leaf debris and put her in the water. Thanks for watching.